Hello and welcome to today's webcast, Copilot for Microsoft 365, brought to you by Insight and Microsoft, where we will delve into key readiness strategies, best practices, and beyond. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This webcast is designed to be interactive between you and the presenter. The webcast console you are looking at can be completely customized. You can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. I would now like to turn over this presentation to our speaker, Anna Donnelly. Anna, floor is now yours.
Thank you, Namita. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Anna Donnelly, and I am a services product manager, and I specialize in Microsoft Modern Work. These days, that is a lot of conversation about Copilot for Microsoft 365. So, we are going to talk through key readiness strategies, whether you already have your licenses, or you're thinking about purchasing licenses, or you've rolled them out. We'll also be talking about best practices for implementation, a little bit about AI beyond Copilot for Microsoft 365. And then we'll talk a little bit about how Insight can help you in your journey with Copilot for Microsoft 365. But before we get started, just very quickly, who we are. We have a 30-year partnership with Microsoft. I always say we are the largest Microsoft services partner that you've never heard of. We are in the top 1% for licensing providers globally. We're number one in revenue. We have about 5,700 dedicated consulting and sales and delivery professionals that are for Microsoft. So you name it, we've seen it, we've done it. And we also have a global footprint. So no matter where you are, we probably can assist you throughout the world, especially with Copilot. If that is something you're thinking of, this is something we've had a global eye on for quite a while. So the first thing that I want to get out of the way, and I won't spend too much time here, except to say that there are many GPT solutions, so generative AI solutions. What we are talking about is Copilot for Microsoft 365, but there's a lot out there. So it starts with ChatGPT and OpenAI, which Microsoft is fully invested in. And that is the public version of a generative AI chat solution. Microsoft's version of that in Microsoft 365 is Copilot. So it's just plain old Microsoft Copilot. It used to be Bing Chat Enterprise. Now it's Copilot for Microsoft 365. They've changed the name to just Microsoft Copilot. Again, that is ChatGPT, but it is Microsoft solution within Microsoft 365, and it offers commercial and data protection, which means that your prompts, your information, it never goes out to the large language model. And it has encryption built in, additional protection from Microsoft's perspective as well. So that's a really good place to start. If you have not journeyed down the road with Copilot for Microsoft 365, and you have Microsoft 365 with Entra Identity, Microsoft Copilot is included. That's probably something that you have today. And again, that offers commercial data protection. Azure AI Studio obviously is the custom version of generative AI that applies to your organization. So if you are building AI solutions, Azure AI Studio is something that you can build solutions in. So that includes supporting the infrastructure and the code to all of those things, right? So whether it's machine learning or cognitive services or the OpenAI service now that exists in Azure, that's custom solutions. Then we get to Copilot for Microsoft 365, and that's more of an assistant in your environment. The way that I describe it is that Copilot for Microsoft 365 is like you give a 10-year-old a big textbook, and you say, okay, I'm going to ask you questions based on the information that is in that textbook. And if you know anything about what it's like communicating with 10-year-olds, in order to get the right response out of them or to get them to do what you want, a lot of times you have to be super specific. So it's not just like, hey, go brush your teeth and go to bed. It's go upstairs. Make sure you grab the right toothpaste. Make sure that the toothpaste makes it on the toothbrush. Make sure the toothbrush goes back in the holder, right? You have to be super specific. In this way, with Copilot for Microsoft 365, you also have to be very specific with how you are prompting in order for it to give you an accurate response. It's got to know a little bit about that. Also, if you're going to get a response out of a 10-year-old based on a textbook, it's going to have to be organized in a way that makes sense to that kid, right? So same thing, your environment has got to be ready for it. All of the things that we've been telling clients for a very long time about readiness and about best practices for Microsoft 365, it's the same thing as best practices and readiness for Copilot for Microsoft 365 as well. So again, it's that 10-year-old needs it to be organized in the right way, and you're going to have to learn how to prompt it or you have to learn how to be very specific about what you need to get the right response. So I'm not going to go through everything here, except to say that this is everything that Microsoft considers a Copilot. There's a lot here. And again, I'm not going to get into everything. It is definitely an eye chart. But if you have a question about any of these things, of course, Insight would love to have a conversation with you about that if you need assistance or if you just want to know a little bit more. But again, pretty much everything that Microsoft has from a productivity perspective or solution, there is going to be some level of Copilot that is involved there. So you get that assistant, that 10-year-old assistant in all of these solutions. And the one thing that I like to talk about Copilot for Microsoft 365 and the Copilot model that I think sometimes is missed. It is different from what you see in the traditional ChatGPT generative AI model, right? It utilizes a large language model, but the only thing that is processed in that large language model is natural language. That's it. So your prompt goes and gets context from the Microsoft Graph. It gets content from Microsoft Graph, which is essentially everything that is stored in Microsoft 365 sits on the Microsoft Graph. So that's it. That's everything from a chat to an email to a file, to changes that are made in your environment to identities. Everything is on the Microsoft Graph. So it gets some context there, it gets grounded out in your data. Then it comes out and it goes to the large language model where it is processed for natural language only. That is it. So there's no learning that occurs. There's no content, no data that is getting stored outside of your environment. As soon as your prompt goes out and it processes it, it goes back to you, and no one in Microsoft can ever see that again. And then from there, it picks up a different additional context from the semantic index. So the semantic index is really what is making the response possible. And that is really kind of a new way of organizing the content in your Microsoft 365 tenants so that it knows how to put context around what it is that you're asking, right? So for instance, instead of it just being a keyword search, I'm searching for elephants, it will know that elephants are pachyderms, they're mammals, they're gray, right? So it knows all of the context around what an elephant is. That's ultimately what the semantic index does with your data in order to give you a response, right? So again, it's not learning anything from your data. It's being processed for natural language outside of your organization only, and that is Microsoft 365. That's Microsoft's large language model that is specific for Copilot for Microsoft 365. Everything that's there exists within the Microsoft 365 trust boundary, which means that any response that it gives you is going to be based on what you have permission to only, right? Now, that does not mean that you don't have permission to things that perhaps you shouldn't have permission to, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But understand that all of the permissions and the data protection and everything that exists in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem certainly carries through to Copilot for Microsoft 365 as well. And then just as a kind of side comment here, yes, you can connect third-party content to the Microsoft Graph, which means that you can have Copilot include responses from external data. So if you have a ServiceNow database, or if you have a file share box, things like that, you can connect it to the graph, so it gives you additional places for it to pull content from. Understand, though, that there is some cost implications for that. Again, these are things that we like talking to our customers about. So if you have questions, reach out. So now we're going to talk about best practices for Copilot for Microsoft 365 implementation. First thing we're going to talk about is getting your data estate ready, right? Who's getting Copilot, I think, is probably the most important thing for a number of reasons, but certainly when we talk about zero trust and where your organization is at with their zero trust deployments, I think that that is one of the things that could be potentially overlooked. That's very important because now you are giving your end users the opportunity to ask a chatbot a question and get an answer about anything in your environment. So if you think about someone getting that end user's credentials and you think about the person who presents the most risk in your environment, if they get those credentials, it's a pretty huge risk, right? So making sure that you have zero trust principles in place, you have all of the right things to make sure that everybody is proving they are who they say they are and proving that they are the person who should have access to the data and the device and everything else in your organization. That is extremely important. So beyond that, what permissions, privacy, compliance, all of those, what are those concerns? Thinking about those ahead of time, I think, is important. Where permissions are concerned, again, bringing that Microsoft Trust boundary into the conversation, in which case, a lot of that is taken care of. But again, just because we have access to something doesn't necessarily mean that we should have access to something. So the one thing that I think is probably the greatest risk and was the biggest learning curve for me is that if you are using OneDrive for Business sharing links and you share with everyone, that now becomes part of the index for the whole organization. So if I share a document and I use that sharing link for everyone, now that is part of the index for the whole organization, right? So that means that the sales deck that I created 6 years ago, that I used to share with everyone link because I was too lazy, because I absolutely am that person. That now is something that could be, be a response to a Copilot prompt. And it might not be relevant, right? It might not be correct. Copilot doesn't know that, in which case you got to make sure that you are checking its work. But, so I think those types of best practices, understanding where the risk exists in your organization is important. What sources should be processed by the semantic index? That's a pretty big one. If you want third-party sources, planning for that. Do you need to migrate content to Microsoft 365? There definitely are some benefits to migrating content into Microsoft 365 that can be, because there is cost implication to connecting third-party services. Again, those are things that we love talking to our clients about. The next one is use cases and personas. So identifying the right users, I think, and how they would use it and get the most value is very important, right? There are things that Copilot today does really, really well, in which case there are people who are going to get more value out of it than others, right? And getting your business involved to help identify and prioritize what those use cases are, I think is very important. Furthermore, Copilot Studio is going to give you the opportunity to build your own Copilot. So it's kind of like being able to tell the 10-year-old what chapter to look at, right? So what it does is it allows you to build chatbots and say, okay, look at this content and this information to provide an answer, and the end user can interact with it with natural language. So it's pretty powerful. But defining those ahead of time and understanding where your return on investment is going to sit is very important. And then lastly, connectors, plugins, how are they going to provide return on investment from a use case and persona perspective? Again, this is where you're going to define where you get return on investment. That $30 per user per month is not a small amount of money, so you want to make sure that you deal with these things ahead of time. And then lastly, end user adoption, right? First of all, the Microsoft adoption framework is really a great place to begin, set up a center of excellence. This is something that Microsoft has available to everyone. It's a template that gets deployed in SharePoint, and it's amazing. Use the tools that are available to you in Microsoft 365. So things like Entra, or formerly Yammer. Use Teams to communicate. Make sure that you are continuously engaging people. Help them understand what Copilot means to them in your training. So it's not just about click here, and here's your Copilot button, and here's how you prompt. Certainly, you have to make sure that you are teaching folks how to prompt, but on the other side, you really have to tell them what that means to them. So it's the difference between, telling someone that Copilot in Word can help them draft content. Okay, versus Copilot in Word can help you write the proposals that you write every day, right? So that's something that means something to that end user. Let's never underestimate how much people outside of IT or technology roles really are not involved in these things, right? They're not thinking about generative AI. They're thinking about how they can get the report out on Friday, right? So we have to give them a reason to use it. That's more important than ever. That certainly is a foundational OCM adoption principle. It's more important than ever here. And then knowledge sharing in groups, I think, is really, really important as well. I just want to throw this up here and show you that there are current product use cases that there's some that are better than others, right? These are the really good product use cases that are out there today. If you have anybody in a project management role, anybody in a sales role, or someone that is on calls like this all day long, it would benefit them from being engaged in the conversation instead of being engaged in writing notes, right? That absolutely is a huge benefit with the availability of what's in Teams to help them on their day-to-day role. Outlook summarization is amazing. Summarization of long documents in Word. Anybody who is creating content or reviewing content that is kind of tedious and lengthy can assist. PowerPoint can help you with first drafts of content as well. Marketing organizations benefit a lot from those sorts of things. So then, we talk about who's going to benefit more than others. I always inevitably get the next question from our clients, which is, who should participate in a Copilot pilot, right? Not enough pilot in our life. So let's talk about a pilot for Copilot for Microsoft 365. So these are the things that I tell our clients regularly. First of all, there are no hard and fast rules for who's getting licenses, right? They always want a number. I get clients who want a number from me. How many should I get, right? That's going to depend on your organization. That's going to depend on everybody's interest in this, right? You might have a relatively technological organization who's really ready to get this and already knows what they're going to ask Copilot, right? On the other hand, you might be a huge organization that maybe has just a handful of people who want to know. So finding out where the return on investment is and understanding how it's going to help everybody else in their organization first is important. So really, again, it's about defining those business use cases and determining who's going to get the most value out of it. Once you do that, make sure that you're bringing leadership into it, and make sure that the leadership that you have participating are the right leaders, right? That who are going to champion new technology and are going to be excited about what their end users are doing, or with what their employees are doing with Copilot for Microsoft 365. And then lastly, don't just give this to IT, okay? I'm assuming that everybody here in some way has some peripheral involvement in IT. You're here because you are interested in this. Again, we can't underestimate how much people kind of don't care about this. In IT, we are super interested in this, and we are all the kinds of end users who want to break stuff, right? We want to find where the weaknesses are. We want to find all of the ways that these things don't work. And we're not really the audience for this kind of thing as a result, right? I went into this a little bit skeptical. So we've had it in our organization now for more than 6 months. And when I first received it, I'm not the audience, right? But then when we started rolling it out to end users, now we've invested in 5,000 licenses in our organization. And I've seen this with the clients that we're working with as well, As soon as you get into the business, the response is very different, right? They see the value in it. And then I've had feedback from people that I work with in employee surveys and conversations with clients where you do hear them saying things like, don't take this away from me. I use it on a daily basis. And guess what? 6 months ago, I didn't use it on a daily basis. These days, I absolutely do. So time and an understanding of really why and how you should use it, I think is extremely important. So don't just leave this to your technical folks. I feel like there's this temptation to always just give it to IT and let them test it. They are not the audience. Make sure you're bringing the business into this. So I want to talk a little bit about AI beyond Microsoft 365 Copilot or beyond Copilot in general, because there are a few questions that we get. So first of all, Teams Premium has a little bit of AI built into it. There is the intelligent recap that is in Teams Premium that's available. And that does a little bit of what Copilot for Microsoft 365 does in Teams meetings, right? Where you can ask it to generate notes for you. The difference is that in Teams Premium, it is giving you AI recap notes. You can't interact with it, right? So it's just saying, here's the notes. Here's what I think the action items are. Whereas Copilot for Microsoft 365 will give you the notes. They'll give you detailed notes. They will allow you to ask questions about what someone said. It will allow you to get the recap of the meeting. It will allow you to get action items, certainly, but then you can ask things like, what was the mood of this meeting? You can ask it about, follow-up questions. So in that way, Teams Premium is really kind of just the beginning, right? It's the first step of kind of that functionality I think everybody loves. So Teams Premium has AI that's built into it already. It does really other super cool stuff, like this nice AI background that I have. This is like my room, but it's cleaner, which is great. It also does other things like, meeting protection and things that really matter to the safety and the security of your organization. But I'm going to talk about my my AI background because I like it. I like it. It's cool, right? This is like a picture of my dog that it decided would be a little more professional if it changed it into something that looks like a Van Gogh painting. So all of that said, that's relevant because we have a lot of these types of AI features that are coming up. So there's this nice thing called the neural processing unit that is going to make a lot of features moving forward that are using AI a lot more efficient on your machine. Surface Pro 9 has this. There's a number of other, I think NVIDIA has a processor that does this. Lenovo, I think, also has its own version of the NPU in some of their devices. Surface Pro 9 absolutely is optimized for AI. This allows it to do things like framing and portrait blur, eye contact, these nice AI backgrounds as well. Again, it makes it efficient to do that because these are things that take a lot of processing power. Indexing content on your machine takes a lot of processing power as well. So it's separating that out and giving that job to the neural processing unit to make it a little bit more efficient. So as a result, we're able to do things like this eye contact thing, right? Where even if I'm not looking at the camera, it makes it look like I am looking at the camera. I don't have that on my device right now. But, if I'm looking over here, it still makes it look like I'm looking at the camera. It's very interesting. Portrait blur and background blur. It gives you options for highlighting the speaker. And then voice focus is great because it's AI background noise. It mutes the background noise for using AI as well. I will tell you that my dogs have been barking throughout this. So if you did not hear them, that means that the AI noise reduction is absolutely working. In fact, she's barking right now. So works pretty well. Okay. And lastly, here's how we help our clients. This is overwhelming when it comes to Copilot for Microsoft 365. We do a lot of stuff. This is stuff that we've been doing for years for Copilot readiness, right? But again, Microsoft 365 best practices, all the stuff we've been telling our clients to do. Make sure you've got zero trust under control. Make sure that you have, um, uh, dealt with SharePoint sprawl, and you have governance, and you have the right adoption framework in place to roll out new stuff in an efficient way. We've been telling our clients to do this for forever. So everything that you see here is something that Insight has done in some way, shape, or form, but it's been reframed a little bit because of the Copilot conversation. Beyond that, we have a number of offerings that we've put together that we can get to you relatively quickly. We can get it underway in your organization. So everything from an initial workshop, which is really just meant for folks who are, in their kind of beginning stages of adoption, all the way to implementing the adoption framework, ongoing assistance with training, and then certainly anything that you saw on the last slide that relates to Copilot readiness. That, again, is a Microsoft 365 best practice. All right, so I appreciate everybody's time. I have come to the end of my presentation, and I am going to hand this really quickly back to Namita to tell us a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna and attendees, for your precious time. Don't forget to schedule a meeting with our experts to go further, faster, and be future ready with Copilot.